Okay. We're going to just jump into this exclusive right to sell. I find that some of us just kind of jump either in the MLS or even use the Century 21 one, and it's just whatever one's there. I'm going to show you some things why I'd suggest you start using the Century 21 exclusive right to sell, because we're trying to protect you. So every time something comes up, Russ and I will go in and make some adjustments and make sure that it is covering every aspect of it. Typically that happens when we get a complaint or something comes up and we're like, well, we could fix that if we just have it in writing. So we're always trying to fix it, make it look better. Occasionally dot loop screws up and puts signatures in weird places. So if you see something weird on the contract, you can reach out, but we're trying to make it good for everybody. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen. Okay, so this is our version of the exclusive right to sell. It is different than the MLS. If you see Century 21 at the top, that's ours. If you see the Utah Association of Realtors with the realtor symbol in the left corner, that one is the MLS one. So we're not gonna go through every part of this, similar to what we did with the buyer broker agreement. I'm gonna highlight some of the differences so that you can kind of see what the differences are. And then if there's any questions on that, we can go through those questions. So the first thing that's a little bit different on ours, up here in the very start process, it says the agreement is entered on the effective date of whatever date you put in there. So this is the effective date of the contract. What typically happens is we think that is when it needs to be on the MLS, because we have really strict rules for the MLS where if you're going to actively market your property, you have to have it on the MLS within 1 business day. The effective day is the day that it's going to go in. That can be different than the day that you signed this on our contract. On the MLS one, it's the date that you put up on the top here is the date that it's beginning. So all of those times start on that date. So let's say that your seller has, a couple things they want to get done. They don't want to list it until next Wednesday. Okay, so we've got a little less than a week to do that. You would put that Wednesday date right there, and the effective date would be Wednesday. It might be signed today, but it'll be different. And I'll show you in the contract later where that protects you and where it talks about that specifically, where in the MLS one, it doesn't do that. So if you're using the MLS one, whatever date you put in there is the date the MLS that it should be going on the MLS. Okay, if we skip down into listing terms, nothing's really changed there. Biggest thing in our brokerage fee. Okay, brokerage fee is in the MLS, this word right here says and. In ours, it's plus. So we have a fee that we charge, the $295 fee. If you don't collect that, then you get to pay that. So we put it in the contract so that the client pays for it. I look at it more as a cost of doing business for the client. You wouldn't be paying for their inspection. You wouldn't be paying for their appraisal. This is the same type of a fee. I put the $295 in there. You can put whatever number you want. The biggest key with this, though, is this percentage plus whatever amount you put in there is going to be the total brokerage fee. So we talked about this last week with the total brokerage fee. When an agent wants to go in and remove that $295 or $495 or whatever they charge, they want to remove it and just pay for it themselves, have their client not pay for it. And so they'll do an addendum to the exclusive right to sell, and they'll say the brokerage fee to be 0. And what they're referring to is that $295 fee is going to be 0. But if you said the total brokerage fee is 0, what does that actually mean? Somebody jump in the chat, or
Everything.
what does it mean? If I did an addendum that said the the brokerage fee to be 0. What am I saying?
That there's no commission?
Yeah.
Correct, Luce. That's what it's saying, is that there is no commission whatsoever. It eliminates the percentage too. So the challenge is, if you've been with our company for more than a couple of years, we used to call this a transaction fee. And then the state came back and said, hey, you can't charge two different things. You need to make them the same thing. And so now it's considered the brokerage fee. And we've referred to the brokerage fee as just that amount, but the brokerage fee is actually the commission. So you're not collecting the $295, you're collecting 3% plus the $295 or whatever you end up putting on there. So just make sure when if you're choosing to pay for that for your client, which is fine, you can choose to pay for that for your client. Just realize that when you do that in addendum, that you're not removing all of your commission at that point. Okay. That's the only thing on the brokerage fee that's changed. If you come down to the protection period, we kept that the same as the MLS. Then there's some significant changes in these seller warranties and disclosures. Okay, the first section that we've added in here starts here at the seller acknowledges. It goes to here. So I'm going to read through this and we'll talk about it. The seller acknowledges that they've entered into an exclusive right to sell listing agreement with Century 21 Everest, and this agreement may have an effective date later than the date the seller signed this agreement. So remember at the start when I said the effective date doesn't have to be the day you're signing. So I could put the effective date next Wednesday and then have them sign today. So it has a different date. In the event the effective date of the real ERS is later than the date this ERS is signed, then the seller agrees they will not enter into another ERS agreement with any other brokerage. Okay, so this is where the concern was if you do the MLS contract and you do an effective date of next Wednesday, and then over the weekend, as every client that we've ever worked with does, they get excited about their house, they start talking about it at family dinner, and sure enough, a family member has a friend who's a friend of a friend who can list their home for free. And if they signed that agreement over the weekend, your contract would be after theirs because your date wouldn't be until Wednesday. In our contract, we've addressed that so that you can have the date signed today and you can have it effective moving forward Wednesday, but our contract will stay ahead of any other contracts being signed. So it protects you in that aspect if you're not going to get it on the market right away. And then the last part of the seller does enter into this agreement, this ERS governs. So basically, this contract is going to take precedence over that. So if you think about contracts, the way that they look at contracts is which one was signed first. If ours was signed first and then another one came in, then ours would take precedence over whatever one's next. So that's one section that protects us with that. Down a little bit further from here, it says we've changed this in the normal MLS. It just talks about that they'll provide a title policy. For us, we put for a standard coverage owner policy of title insurance for buyer in the amount of the purchase price. So we've clarified that one, it's for the purchase price, and two, it's a standard coverage owner policy. Where in the MLS version, it doesn't talk about the purchase price and it doesn't talk about the standard coverage. It just says they'll offer, they'll pay for title insurance. So, you know, if they're trying to pay for a lesser amount or something, this is where it guarantees they'll pay what our real estate purchase contract is going to ask for anyway. The next section in here, let's see. This is one I want to bring up. This is in our other one, but this is really important here. The seller agrees to indemnify and hold harmless the seller's agent and the company agent against any claims that may arise from the following. So basically, if a lawsuit comes about let's say that the buyer decides to sue the seller because of a transaction, because of the transaction, doesn't matter what it is, and the agent had nothing to do with it. What they do is attorneys will go in and they'll say, who's involved in this transaction? Who had any part in this transaction? And then they name everybody in the transaction. And the challenge is if you have any part of the transaction, you're going to be named in that transaction, because they can't go back and name you. I see myself freezing. And my voice freezing too, Russ? Okay. I see my picture freezing, but I don't know that. Okay. So what they do is they'll pull everybody into the lawsuit, and they'll serve everybody on the lawsuit, which is very nerve-wracking if you've ever get that experience. But then they go through and then indemnify, and they hold harmless. They pull people out of the transaction. So they'll look at the agent and they say, okay, the agent had nothing to do with this particular problem. We're not going to pursue them. We're not going to involve them with it. So we want to make sure that if there's anything that happens with the property, we get pulled out of the contract, and the seller will hold us, that they'll agree to getting us out of that contract. So sometimes they have to say, yeah, they don't have any part of this, so we want them out. This is where they're agreeing to that. And then the last part of here, we've added this bottom section here. Seller will be required to notify the listing agent and or listing brokerage in writing of any defects in the property known to the seller that materially affect the value of the property. If this notification is not provided to the listing agent or brokerage in writing, it is as if it did not occur. Okay, so we know that as agents, if something happens in the property and we know about it, we have a duty to disclose specific things. Okay, we have to be able to share those with agents that call us, but it's not our responsibility to just assume things are done. The seller needs to provide that for us. So if they provide that in writing, that's where it needs to be put in there. Any material effect affecting the value of the property. Okay. Any questions on that first page before we jump to the second page?
Yes, that disclosure part, Jason, wouldn't that be part of the seller disclosures? Or
Yes.
are we talking about something different?
Nope, that's part of the seller's disclosures, but so they're going to fill out the seller's disclosures right up here on the top, where we're asking them to sign the seller's disclosures and fill those out. So what this is talking about is, let's say that during your transaction, something else happens to the property. Let's say that they do an inspection and the inspector comes back and says there's a crack in the foundation and that needs to be addressed. And the seller says, yeah, I don't really want to disclose that to the buyer, so I'm not going to put it on the MLS, or I'm not going to put it on the seller's disclosures. Well, yeah, it's a material effect of the property. We would have a problem with them not disclosing that. We would need them to disclose that. Does that make sense, Luz?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. The next page, duties of a limited agent. That's the same as the MLS one. This number 6, this one is different than the MLS. Expiration, the expiration date of this contract will automatically extend to closing date if the property is under contract. When property is pending under contract, seller instructs seller's agent to not present any more offers. Okay, so there's 2 parts to this one. One is, let's say that our listing expires at the end of the month, but the under contract pushes it until April. This means we don't have to go back in and change our contracts. This contract will extend until that closes. So this is really helpful for like new construction, where it can just continue on until it's done. If it goes really far, you might want to update the exclusive right to sell, but you don't need to, because this will extend to when it closes. The second part of this is when the property is pending or under contract, seller instructs seller's agent to not present any more offers. Okay, so this was a bigger deal back when we had like short sales and things where lots of offers were coming in and you're in the process of working with an offer at the time. You don't want to submit any more offers. But it also is a good thing where once you've gone under contract, you know, you don't have to present every offer back to the seller. We're asking for permission to, they're instructing us not to present any more offers. So if you get an agent that comes in, you worked really hard to get it under contract, and you have somebody who's comes in and says, oh, I'd offered you 10,000 more, and they sent the thing over, you can hold on to that. And if the offer closes, then you can move forward, but you don't have to mess up the water that time. Professional advice. It's the same as in the MLS. I just want to touch on this for a second. If we start going into areas where we are not the professional and we start giving them suggestions on what they should do and they shouldn't do, we got to be very careful with what we say when we don't have the license or the professionalism to do that. We can then be brought into a problem with that. I always remember, I don't know if maybe Russ, you tell this in your class, I can't remember where I heard it from, but there was the story of the agent in a California office. I don't think it was in our office, but the buyer was going into the house and there was a weird smell. And he said, what's that smell? And the agent said, oh, that's the ocean, that's the sea, that's what it smells like. And so they went in, they closed on the property, and then they found out later that the sewer line had broken, and that was what the smell was. And they found that the agent was actually in violation of going beyond their scope of expertise and giving them advice that they followed, and was actually liable for that as well. So, so just be careful with your professional advice in that section. Number 8, dispute resolutions, is pretty much the exact same as the MLS. Russ and I will fix this. It says 8 and then number 8 here, so we'll fix those. This should be 9. So every once in a while we see things that we've got to fix, but that one doesn't affect too much, but we will get it fixed.
Jason,
Number 10.
Jason,
Yes.
sorry. On the page before, since you're going to go in and make corrections, I can't see it. Can you go back? Okay. Just the page before where it said not, whoa. Okay, right there, number 4, about halfway, and it says right there, go across, buyer and seller, period. And then lowercase, yes, I am
Yep.
grammar police. So yeah, either, fix that somehow, parentheses or comma or.
Yeah, we will fix that. In
I didn't
fairness,
say anything because I didn't
just so
know.
everybody on the call knows, in fairness, Russ and I haven't done anything with this contract yet.
Okay, thanks.
Yes. So we will get things like that fixed and a few other things on here. So, okay. Let's go back down to here. Number 10, authorizing seller, advertising, seller authorizes. We did add in ours some social media and videography. We had a complaint come in, I don't know if it was a month or 2 ago, that they were upset that their home was on some social media posts. So we wanted to make sure that we are getting authorization to use social media and video. The MLS does not have the social media section on there yet, but I would imagine they'll get it on there, just with everything going social media. Most sellers aren't really worried about their home being on social media because they want it to be exposed, but it does happen occasionally. We did have one call into the office and be upset about it. So we just put it in there so that we can protect ourselves with that. The MLS has A through K on this. They're all the same. We added
So sorry, before you keep going.
Yep.
When we're talking about that, is if there's a post on Facebook, to ask the seller if they are okay, And also if we do anything with KSL, also ask for that?
Well, that's what this is covering now. But I mean, obviously I would have, if you're doing anything specific, getting permission from your seller is just one added benefit and protection for you. So,
Okay.
I mean, it might be something you want to just add into your presentation, just says, hey, I'm going to put it on Facebook and I'm going to put it on social media, and this is where it's going to go. Is there any issues with that? It doesn't help, it doesn't hurt you to get more authorization from your seller. We're trying to cover a lot of this in section 10, but the challenge is that most sellers are not reading 100% of these contracts. So just because they didn't read it doesn't mean they don't get upset about it. And just because we pointed out later doesn't mean they're not still upset about it. So we want to manage our risk, but still be able to communicate with our clients to let them to know what it is. So this section 10, there's a lot of things they're authorizing us to do, and they may or may not be okay with all of them. And so they might want to just read through it. But this protects us, and that's what we're trying to do through that process. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so L and M, we'll read through these real quick. When property is pending under contract, instruct agents to not present any more offers or any other or allow any more showings. That's more of an emphasis on us not having to do those things for the seller. A lot of times it's just more of an inconvenience for them. But if you have an agent that's saying, hey, I really want to show the home, but it's under contract, you can refer to that the seller's instructed you not to have any more showings. M, in the event a buyer's agent requests to present an offer in person to the seller gives written authorization to the designated listing agent of the brokerage to decide if the offer will be presented in person or not. So this was more of a common thing years ago, where the buyer's agent would want to present in person to your seller, and they'd want to present their case. Russ and I were talking about it. I mean, the last time I've done it, I've seen that was probably 10 years ago. I don't know if it's still a common practice or not by some agents, but with technology, I don't see that as much. But this gives us authorization to reject that if we wanted to. There is some circumstances, Russ and I were talking about some circumstances where it might be beneficial to get the seller and the buyer together and really decide some of the specific points so you can get it done. That's one thing that used to be really a benefit, where you could sit down with the client and the buyer would be out in the car and you talk to them, take your contract to the car, they'd look at it, they'd present a counter offer, and you walk away with a signed contract. So there's some benefits to it, but I don't see that happening as much. But this gives you authorization to not do that if they request it. Okay, before we jump to the next page, any questions on this one? Okay, we're going to go to the last page. Okay, the last page, personal property is the same as the MLS. I always think it's important to have a conversation with your client about personal property, just giving them the caution of, put away loose items. The hard part is that buyer's agents are responsible for what happens in a home when they go in a home, but if there's multiple people that have gone through the home in the day, it's really hard to prove what's happened and with who. I guess now a lot of sellers have cameras in their homes and videos and speakers that they can hear every conversation that goes on the house. So just be cautious with what you're doing in the house. Attachments, it's the same. If you're going to add any attachments to the contract, attachments would be like if you're adding specific things the seller wants, you'd put that in an addendum to this contract. If there's, if you're excluding somebody, or if you're doing anything of that sort, you're gonna do an attachment. So this exclusive right to sell is just like a real estate purchase contract. If there's more terms being added or terms being taken away, you've got to do that on an addendum to do that. Okay. This foreign investment in real estate property tax, the FIRPTA, We did go through and add more information in here than the MLS has. We put in the sections of the IRS codes. And then we also added this, if I am a foreign person, this is my address section. So it doesn't change what it says from the MLS. It just gives a little bit more detail of what they're asking for on that. You know, that's something that you just want to make sure that they're disclosing the right thing when they go into the when you have a client doing that. And then 13, 14, 15, and 16 haven't changed from the MLS. So you can see there's certain changes that we've made. A lot of it, I mean, we're not trying to deviate from the MLS. They've spent lots of time working on that. And as things come up, they'll add them, we'll add them. I think we adjust our contract a little bit more frequently than the MLS. We try to stay with it, but then the MLS will add certain things into it as well. So that is the exclusive right to sell versus the MLS one. I would highly suggest that you use ours because there's been some times where we've got some complaints and we've thought, oh, okay, that's not a problem, that's covered in our exclusive right to sell, and we find out that the agent has used the other one and not this one. So that puts us in a position where we might not have the protection that we were hoping. So any questions on the exclusive right to sell?
Yes.
Okay.
Is there an updated as of date on the document? Because when we go back in, you know, and we pick one up, oh, last modified, perfect. Didn't
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah, right on the bottom. So we'll try to input those. We change them out on dot loop. So if you're just using the main Century 21 forms in dot loop, that will always be updated. But occasionally you'll move the document into like your personal folder for easy access. If you do that, then we won't update that. You'll have to go in and switch that one out because that would keep the old one in there. So yeah, we last modified it just last week, trying to change. There was some signatures in the wrong place, and that was more of like a dot loop issue that we had. So, but yeah, we're going to make some of these grammatical changes. Russ is an English, whatever you call that. He's professional
English is a second language.
So, yes, so he will do that, and we'll fix everything else. But any other questions? Okay, that's what we have for you guys today. Hopefully that's helpful. Always reach out to Russ or I if you have any questions. It's always easier to solve a problem before it becomes a problem. So you guys are welcome to call us anytime.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Have a great day.